Everyone knows the name Christopher Columbus, the sailor who crossed the ocean, the man schoolbooks used to present as the discoverer of a new world. But the real story, the story you rarely hear, is not about discovery. It is about shock. It is about misunderstanding. It is about arrogance, retaliation, and the first fights that erupted when Europe stepped onto shores where people had already lived, loved, traded, and dreamed for centuries. Picture the Atlantic at night in 1492. The sea is black glass, the wind falls and rises, pushing creaking ships across a water highway no European map could fully explain. On the deck, sailors whisper prayers and curses. They have not seen land for far too long, rations run thin, tempers run hot. And then, land. An island ringed with white sand and blue water, brilliant under a rising sun. Forests sway like green cathedrals, rivers gleam like silver threads, and on the beach, people, brown-skinned, bright-eyed, adorned with feathers, shells, and small glints of yellow metal that catch the light and catch the gaze of men who crossed an ocean searching for it. They are the Taino, farmers, fishers, canoe makers, weavers of cotton, gardeners of cassava and sweet potato. Their villages, bohíos of thatch and wood, sit in circles around plazas where music and story pass from voice to voice. Their world is not empty. It is not waiting to be found. It is full. At first, curiosity walks ahead of fear. The Taino approach, cautious but open-handed. They offer food, fruit, water, parrots, brilliant living jewels. The Europeans offer beads, bells, and mirrors. The men from the ships touch everything. They marvel at hammocks, woven cradles in the air. They marvel at canoes cut from tree trunks, so long and light they fly over waves. The Taino marvel at iron that sings when struck, at the sharpness of steel, at the coarse hair on men's chins, at cloth-dyed colours they have not seen. But beneath the marvelling, something else moves. The Europeans keep glancing at gold. The word repeats in their thoughts like a drum. Gold. A small pauldron at a chief's neck. A thin nugget braided into hair. A dusting in a carved ornament. Decoration to the Taino. Obsession to their guests. Every sparkle is a promise, and promise hardens into intention. Days pass. The Europeans ask questions with gestures and smiles, then with pressure. Where does the gold come from? Who has more? Which river hides it? Which mountain holds it? Trade turns into demand. Hospitality turns into tribute. And the Taino, who believe land is shared and generosity is noble, begin to feel the tilt. The men from the ships do not come and go. They stay. They plant tall crosses and banners and declare the land to belong to a king who sleeps under another sky. For now, the peace holds by threads. Then comes the wreck of a ship, the Santa Maria, splintered on a reef in the night. In the morning panic, the visitors pile what they can save. Columbus decides to leave men behind on the island of Hispaniola. He calls the place La Navidad because it is near Christmas when the ship breaks. He orders a small fort, a rough nest of timbers gathered from the wreck, and he says he will return soon with more ships, more supplies, more glory. The men left behind cheer. Some think they will live like lords among gentle people. Some think they have already found a new life. He sails away. The horizon swallows the ships. Silence falls, and in that silence, everything changes. At first, the people in La Navidad are tolerated. They eat what they are given. They accept shelter. But the days grow hot, and the men grow bolder. They demand more food. They grow angry when a chief says no. They take women. They raid villages. They swagger with the confidence of iron and the mistaken belief that their hosts are powerless. The Taino watch, and the generosity that met the ships at the beach cools into suspicion, then fury. Word travels along island paths. News of insult, theft, and assault. Chiefs meet. Eyes hold fire. One name rises again and again: Caonabo. A leader of great stature, feared by enemies, respected by allies, a man who sees clearly enough not to be dazzled by mirrors and beads. Night falls on the fort of La Navidad. In the distance, a drum. In the forest, movement. Then from many directions, quiet feet and sudden flame. Torches lift, arrows zip. The rough walls of the fort roar and collapse under heat. The men inside, the ones who thought they were masters, are scattered, hunted, killed. By morning, the first European settlement in the Americas is ash and smoke. It is not a rebellion against discovery. It is a simple, uncompromising answer to abuse. Months pass. On the sea, sails appear. Columbus returns, this time with power. 17 ships, over 1,000 men. Horses whose hooves will shock people who have never seen beasts ridden to war. Dogs bred to tear and trained to obey. The beach that once knew handshakes and gifts now watches an army disembark. Columbus walks the sand, and the laughter drains from his face. La Navidad is gone, burned. The men he left are dead. He will write reasons. He will make accusations. He will tell the story from his side. But the char was answer enough. He vows order, then he vows punishment. A new fortress rises, stone replacing splinters, discipline replacing the chaos he blames on dead men. The Spanish fan out. They march inland with iron hats and shirts of mail. They demand tribute, food first, then cotton, then gold. Always gold. The Taino watch their gardens uprooted, their stores emptied, their people yoked to carry burdens for men who claim the right to command. And as pressure mounts, so does resistance. The early fights are not grand battles with banners unfurled. They are shadow skirmishes at forest edge, narrow ambushes along river bends, sudden arrows from green walls of leaves. A Spanish patrol walks in a line, and one by one men fall as shafts whisper out from the shade. A messenger hurries along a path and does not arrive. At night horses snort and roll their eyes, their riders tense at every crack of branch and sweep of wind. But there are other kinds of encounters, blunt and brutal. A village that refuses to provide food is set alight. A chief who refuses tribute is seized. Spanish steel is a new language here, and the sentences it writes are short and merciless. Crossbows cough bolts through shields of wood, swords cut where clubs shatter, noise rolls out of metal tubes, the first thunder of gunpowder, and men who have not heard such sound feel their hearts lurch. Slowly the fighting gathers weight. The Taino understand that a storm has come, and that only unity can face it. Messages run across the island faster than ships can beat wind. Chiefs meet beneath trees. Hands touch in agreement. Caonabo's name returns and carries the force of decision. If the invasion cannot be spoken away and cannot be bought away, it must be fought. In the fertile valley of Vega Real, events crest. It is a place of green fields and wide sky, a place where gardens could feed thousands and where thousands might now gather to defend them. Taino warriors assemble, men from many villages, under many leaders, brought together by fear for their children and fury at humiliation. Estimates that cross centuries vary wildly, but every telling agrees. Their numbers dwarf the columns of ironclad strangers. Across the field stand the Europeans, fewer by far, but heavy with weapons that turn numbers into targets. Cavalry paw the earth. Crossbowmen check strings and bolts. Soldiers coax fire into slow matches that will ignite powder and spit flame. Leashes strain in soldiers' hands. Dogs bare teeth and wait. Imagine the quiet before it breaks. A bird sings from a reed. A breeze strokes tall grasses. Then, from one side, a shout. Arrows darken a patch of sky. Spears lift and flash. The Taino surge, brave as men have ever been brave, running not at phantoms but at strangers who have taken from them and demand to take more. The Spanish answer with thunder. Cannons belch smoke and iron. Men who have never known such sound clutch at their ears even as they run. Horses charge, great weight and speed and noise ploughing open lanes in ranks that cannot yet imagine how to close them. Dogs are unleashed. The animals leap, taught to go for throat and limb, and terror skids through the line like oil through water. Crossbows hiss and drums of hooves beat. The first line buckles, the second shudders. Leaders shout orders to hold, and many men do hold, fighting body to body with club and spear and teeth, holding because courage sometimes refuses to count. For a long handful of minutes, the outcome hangs on stamina and on the shock of novelty. Then the Europeans' advantages compound. Metal deflects blows that would empty a naked hand. Horses break lines that could not be broken by men on foot. The noise of powder and the sting of smoke disorient. And finally, the Taino line breaks. Warriors run, not because they are cowards, but because the field demands a price too high to pay. They scatter into forest and brush, and the battle has a name now, Vega Real. It will be remembered as the moment when courage met a machine it did not know how to dismantle. In the days that follow, Spanish columns move fast and hard to exploit the victory. Villages that hesitate are punished without hesitation. Forts rise at strategic points like teeth biting into a map. Tribute is not a suggestion, it is a schedule. Cotton here every 3 months, gold there, measured by the hand every 3 months. And when gold is not enough because gold is never enough, hands themselves are threatened with blades. People who once met the strangers at the beach with food now hide food from them and hide themselves. But a war is not just fields and forts, it is also stories. And one story spreads on Hispaniola like a splinter that will not come out. Caonabo, the man whose name steadied men's spines, whose reputation burned hot enough to boil blood, is still free. For the Europeans, this is unacceptable. A trophy and a warning in one body, he must be taken, and soon. They do not challenge him with banners raised. They do not send a regiment to flush him from forest to clearing. They send instead a man with a plan, bold, theatrical, more trick than duel. Gifts are gathered, gleaming, unusual, captivating to eyes accustomed to wood and shell. Among them, polished iron cuffs, shaped like bracelets a foreign monarch might wear. A story is woven about kings in distant lands and the beautiful ornaments they prefer. The messenger smiles. The metal shines. Curiosity, the same force that once brought two peoples to trade on a beach, now sharpens to a point. Caonabo, they say, examines the cuffs. He speaks with the men who brought them. He weighs pride against suspicion, insult against opportunity. He slips a wrist into a ring of iron to see how a king's bracelet feels. The hinge swings. The lock bites. Another ring closes. The sound is small. Its echo is not. He is seized, he is bound, he is paraded, so that allies will feel the ground shift and enemies will imagine themselves next. The plan is to send him over the ocean as a prize, to sit before men who will try to measure him and fail. But the sea, which has already chosen sides with no one, takes him before any court can. He dies during the voyage, distant from the island paths he knew so well, surrounded not by elders and kin, but by planks and ropes and salt air that smells like metal and mourning. With Caonabo gone and the will of the island battered at Vega Real, resistance fractures. Not everywhere, not all at once. Courage flickers even in wind, and you cannot stamp out flame you cannot see. But the occupiers' machinery now runs with fewer jams. Governors' orders harden into policy. The tribute system, the repartimiento in one form, and then the encomienda in others, grinds people into units of work and weight. Adults are marked by quotas. Bring cotton, bring gold, bring labor, bring what we ask when we ask, or face punishment not written in any book the Taino ever read. How do you measure the aftermath of a first fight? In the number of villages moved, then moved again. In the number of gardens gutted to feed men who do not sow. In the weeping of mothers whose sons vanish into forests at dusk and do not return because patrols moved quickly and quietly and without mercy. In the quiet that falls over a plaza when disease arrives ahead of a drumbeat, coughs and fevers the Taino have never known, to which they have no shield. Sickness is carried not by malice, but by breath and skin and the simple fact of proximity. Within a generation, the numbers collapse. People who once argued about dances and harvest yields now argue about survival, and often even that argument does not last long. Names of chiefs who once lit the sky dim. Stories of the first fights flatten into a single sentence in the tongues of conquerors. Pacification. Peace, the word claims. But peace requires consent, and consent was never offered. And still, in the middle of this dark descent, there are moments of refusal that deserve to be remembered. A small band that takes to the hills and fights for years, haunting the edges of every road. A village that hides its food in places wolves could not find. A mother who teaches her child both the old words and the new, so that nothing is lost that can be kept. Survival is resistance. Memory is resistance. Telling the story is resistance. When we step back, when we ask what was first about the first fight with Columbus, we see more than a skirmish or a burnt fort. We see a pattern being drawn. Demand cloaked as law, violence dressed as discipline, theft rationalized as tribute, lies folded into diplomacy, and when all else fails, noise and horses and iron to end the conversation. We also see the other pattern, quieter but no less real. People defending home with tools at hand, banding together across old divisions, risking lives for land and for one another, learning quickly, adapting, trying again even when again seems impossible. The truth is, there was never a moment when two monoliths met, Europe and America, and tested each other like wrestlers on a stage. There were people, village by village, decision by decision, mistake by mistake. Some Taino welcomed more than others. Some Spaniards doubted more than others. Some tried peace until peace was torn from their hands. Some chose advantage over mercy. Some could not imagine that anything other than their king's will mattered. Some could not imagine that anything other than their island's dignity mattered. Collision made of millions of choices, but lit by a few glowing cores: greed, fear, courage, love, and hunger. If you hold your ear to the timeline, you can still hear the moments that changed everything. The first time a steel blade flashed in a tropical sun. The first time a drumbeat called men to a valley, none of them would forget. The small click of a lock closing on Caonabo's wrist. The crack of a cannon that made a child drop a clay cup and run. The hiss of an arrow that flew true, then vanished into armor with a sound like rain into leaves. These sounds do not live in books alone. They live in the descendants of the people who first stood on that beach. They live in the languages that survived and the songs that found new instruments and the gardens that still grow crops first tended by hands long gone. They live in warnings too, because once you know how the first fights began, how easy it was to confuse generosity with weakness, how efficient the machine of conquest can be, how quickly a guest can become a ruler, you cannot unsee it when the same patterns bloom again on other shores in other centuries. And so, when we speak speak the name Columbus, we must be exact. He was not just a sailor, he was a commander. He did not just arrive, he imposed. He did not just explore, he extracted. Around him were men who believed they were instruments of glory. In front of him were people who knew they were people, not instruments or resources or stepping stones, and who proved it by the only argument invaders sometimes truly hear: resistance. The first fights were not the largest, not the longest, not the bloodiest of what would follow, but they were the first spark on dry grass. They taught the invaders what fear felt like when a fort burned. They taught the islanders what iron felt like when it bit. They set terms, drew lines, made examples. And then the examples multiplied across seas and continents, to shores of other islands, to coasts of vast lands to the west, to plains and forests where other peoples would hear the story of Vega Real without ever hearing its name and know instinctively what it meant. If you stayed with me this far, you have walked from a bright beach through smoke to a battlefield and out again into a quiet that is not peace. You have watched men ride animals that seemed like myths, and you have watched men stand in front of them without breaking. You have seen generosity sour into rule, and you have watched a trick with jewelry become a chain. You have traced the line from first contact to first command, and understood how quickly a story can change when one side writes it in iron. This channel is where we tell these other versions, the ones that hold more people, more pain, and more truth. If this story opened even one new window for you, subscribe and help it reach others. The channel is still young. Your support lets me keep digging, keep writing, keep giving names and faces back to moments that were almost erased. There are more stories like this, of battles you never learned, of leaders you were never told, of courage in places maps once called empty. I'll bring them to you. You bring your curiosity and your voice, and remember the beach, remember the fort, remember the valley whose grasses hid arrows and whose air carried thunder. Remember Caonabo, who could not be made small even when iron tried. Remember the people who first fought Columbus, not because they hated strangers, but because they knew what home was and what it would cost to lose it. And remember this: history does not belong to those who arrive, it belongs to those who endure.